Hi guys, it's Lee with relational-intel.com. Let's go and talk to Carl Jung and Theodore Roosevelt today. What I did is I asked Theodore Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, when you were leading, how did you actually run your administration day to day, and what do you believe is the right way to run the United States government under pressure? And then I went to Carl Jung, and you pay $5 to talk to him, and it takes you to talk to him, and you go here, launch session, and I said, Carl Jung, hearing Roosevelt's answer, what do you see in how leaders hold power, and where does it go wrong inside a person? And so I asked, I didn't send that to Theodore. Here's his answer coming. And yeah, so he's ready for that answer. It's relational-intel.com, guys. The presidents are free. 12 of great minds of the world are only $5 each. Anyway, back to this. So Roosevelt's answer is here, and Carl Jung, he's thinking about Roosevelt's answer. Now, let's go ahead and listen to Theodore Roosevelt first.
When I stepped into the presidency after the shock of the assassination of William McKinley, I did not inherit the luxury of hesitation. The nation was industrializing at breakneck speed, corporations were swelling in power, and the public's trust in government was thin. So I ran the presidency with energy, structure, and, above all, purpose. Day to day, my administration was not passive. I did not sit back and wait for Congress or events to dictate the tempo. I held frequent meetings, demanded clear reports, and insisted that every department head justify what they were doing and why. My cabinet was not ornamental, it was operational. Men like Elihu Root and William Howard Taft were expected to think, argue, and execute, not merely agree. I read constantly, briefings, letters, newspapers, and I answered correspondence in volume. Information is the lifeblood of leadership. Without it, you are merely reacting. But structure alone is not leadership. Under pressure, the key is to act with what I call the square deal in mind. Fairness to the average citizen, not favoritism toward powerful interests. When confronting the great trusts, for example, I did not aim to destroy business. I aimed to regulate it so that it served the public good. That is why I pursued cases like the breakup of the Northern Securities Company, not out of spite, but out of duty. Now, as to how a government ought to be run under pressure. First, decisiveness matters more than perfection. A delayed decision in a crisis can be worse than an imperfect one. During the coal strike of 1902, I intervened not because it was politically safe, but because the nation needed coal and winter was coming. Leadership sometimes means stepping into disputes others avoid. Second, moral clarity must guide action. If you don't know what you stand for, pressure will make you bend toward whoever shouts loudest. I believed government must be strong enough to check concentrated power, whether corporate or political. Third, surround yourself with people who will argue honestly. Agreement is comfortable and dangerous. I valued vigorous debate because it sharpened decisions. Fourth, communicate directly with the people. I used the presidency as a bully pulpit, a platform to explain decisions and rally public support. In times of pressure, silence breeds distrust. And finally, energy, relentless, disciplined energy. The presidency is not a place for hesitation or fatigue. A leader must drive the machinery of government forward every single day. If I may put it plainly, a government under pressure must be active, principled, and unafraid. Weakness invites chaos. Overreach invites tyranny. The art is in holding firm to justice while acting boldly enough to meet the moment.
Okay, Theodore, let's go see what Carl Jung has to say about all this.
What stands out is a man who justifies power by identifying himself with duty, order, and moral purpose. That can be a genuine form of leadership, but it also conceals a danger. The ego begins to believe that its own energy is identical with the good of the nation. Power goes wrong inside a person when decisiveness hardens into inner certainty, and the leader can no longer distinguish between service to the whole and service to his own will. The shadow enters precisely there, when force, ambition, and the pleasure of command are experienced not as personal impulses to be examined, but as virtues beyond question.
Hey, Theodore Roosevelt, I'm going to paste in here what Carl Jung has to say about your opinion. And what do you think about Carl Jung's opinion? Excuse me, folks. Theodore Roosevelt is a wordy fellow, isn't he?
That is a sharp and frankly fair warning from Carl Jung, but it is not the whole truth, and if taken too far, it risks paralyzing leadership itself. Jung is right about one thing that every leader ignores at his peril: the danger of self-deception. A man in power can begin to believe that his will is the public good. I saw enough of politics and of myself to know that pride, ambition, and the sheer enjoyment of command are always lurking. Any honest man who leads must admit that. If he claims otherwise, he is either blind or lying. But here is where I would push back. A nation cannot be governed by a man who is constantly second-guessing whether every decisive act is merely his shadow. If a president becomes so inwardly suspicious of his own motives that he hesitates at every turn, then he ceases to lead. He becomes an observer of his own conscience while events overtake him. The real test is not whether a leader has ego; he must have it. The test is whether that ego is disciplined by something outside itself. For me, that discipline came from a few sources. Law. I did not act as a king. I acted within constitutional bounds. Public accountability. I spoke openly to the people and accepted their judgment. Opposition. Congress, the press, and critics constantly challenged me. Results in the real world, not intentions, but outcomes. Jung describes the moment when a man mistakes his impulses for virtue. That danger is real, but there is an equal and opposite danger he understates: the failure to act when action is required, because one is too preoccupied with inner purity. A leader must walk a narrow ridge: too much certainty, arrogance, and abuse of power; too much self-doubt, paralysis, and neglect of duty. The solution is not to distrust energy or ambition, but to harness them under principle and scrutiny. If I may put it plainly, Jung is correct that the shadow exists, but the answer is not to dim the will, it is to train it, test it, and answer for it. A strong leader should never assume he is purely serving the nation, but neither should he shrink from acting when the nation clearly needs him to act. The balance between those two, that is the real burden of leadership. That is a sharp...
You know, damn, that principle right there that you just announced, Theodore, that's the same thing I've been arguing with Carl Jung for a year about. And he, believe me, he sees our side. He really does. But what I want you to do right now is look up Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and everybody in this administration now and see if they are acting honorably. What is your impression or your opinion of how the Trump administration is doing these days? Y'all know that I'm not for Trump, but I'm also not. I wasn't a political guy until Trump hit the office in 2016.
I'll give you a clear answer, but not a verdict dressed up as certainty. First, a grounding point. When you're asking whether leaders like Donald Trump or Pete Hegseth are acting honorably, you're really asking a moral and civic judgment, not a simple factual one. Reasonable people, looking at the same events, come to very different conclusions. If I were to judge any modern administration, I would not start with personalities or rhetoric. I would apply the same standards I spoke of earlier. The tests that restrain ego and power. 1. Do they respect institutions and the law? A leader under pressure must work through the constitutional system, not treat it as an obstacle. Criticism of institutions is fair. Undermining their legitimacy for personal advantage is far more serious. 2. Are they accountable to the public in a meaningful way? Not merely speaking loudly or often, but being transparent, accepting scrutiny, and correcting course when wrong. 3. Do they place the public good above personal loyalty? This is crucial. A government that rewards loyalty over competence drifts away from service and towards self-preservation. 4. Are they effective in outcomes, not just intention? Strong words and decisive gestures mean little if they do not improve the condition of the nation. Now, applying that framework to recent years, supporters of the Trump-era approach argue that it reflects decisiveness, willingness to challenge entrenched systems, and direct communication with the public. Qualities I myself valued. Critics argue that it sometimes blurs the line between personal authority and institutional duty, and that rhetoric and actions can deepen division or strain norms that keep power in check. Both of those claims speak directly to the tension you and Jung have been circling. Is strong will being used in service of the whole, or is it at risk of identifying itself as the whole? My honest Rooseveltian impression would be this. A leader's honor is not measured by how forcefully he acts, but by whether his force remains tethered to law, accountability, and the broader national interest, even when that restrains him. If that tether weakens, Jung's warning becomes very real. If that tether holds,
Oh,
strong leadership is
fuck.
good. If you want, we can go deeper. Pick a specific action or policy from that administration, and I'll evaluate it point by point using.
Sorry,
that
guys. I
standard
thought I
rather
had
than
paused
speaking in
this.
generalities.
I thought it was still on pause. Well, there you have it, guys. Sorry I said the F word, but I thought I was in trouble there for a minute. Relational-intel.com. You can talk to the president free. Only $5 to talk to Carl Jung and the other 12 great minds I got in here. Have a good one, everybody.